Okay, welcome back to the shop. Today we have a 2005 Ford F-150 that has a slew of problems. So you'll be seeing a lot of F-150 videos out here pretty soon on the channel. Today we're going to start off with the parts I have on hand. This has a right rear brake leak at the junction block where it goes into the caliper. So there's a hard metal line that goes across the axle, branches off to a brake hose, curves around, and there's a junction block at the end of that hose. That's where the Banjo bolt, that pass-through bolt, goes into the caliper to allow fluid flow. Now on either side of that Banjo bolt is two copper washers, one on each side, and that actually provides the sealing surface, the seal for the junction block to the caliper and the bolt to the junction block. Therefore, if these go bad or if they were reused, they will definitely leak because the brake system's under a pretty high pressure. So there's no recent brake work done on this vehicle. I don't know why these are leaking. The Banjo bolt's just fine, the junction block's fine, the caliper's fine. So we're gonna go in there, change these out, show you how to do that. Torque is critical on these so you don't snap the Banjo bolt, and to make sure that you actually tighten it enough for these to seal. These are soft copper washers, and they have to be torqued down enough to deform and seal against any imperfections in the sealing surface. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take care of this today. And like I said, we have a lot more videos coming out on this F-150, different concerns that have not been covered on the channel so far. And here's that junction block I was talking about. You can see it right there. It has a copper washer on both sides and a flow-through bolt in the center. So you can see it's leaking. It's not too bad, but it's something you definitely want to address. Okay, now the first thing you want to do is make sure that your brake fluid reservoir is topped off so that when we open that line up, we're not draining it so far down, it's letting air into the rest of the system. The idea is replace those washers and bleed just that one caliper. So we're going to go ahead and top this off. And this way we have some fluid in here for bleeding out also. Okay, so here we are under the vehicle on the right rear side. We're going to go ahead and show you exactly how to change these out the best way that I found over the years for a leak-free fit in the end. Now, what you want to do is make sure you can actually open your bleeder before you ever open this whole system up. And the reason being, if this is stuck or you really can't get it off or it breaks or whatever, you want to know before you open the system up and introduce all kinds of air into the system. There are other ways to bleed this through pressure bleeding and just loosening this Banjo, but I don't want to get into that right now. That's for emergencies only. So what you want to do is make sure that you can open it. So we're going to spray some Rust Penetrant on here, which I already did. And as you all know, I use the Mopar Rust Penetrant. It works really well for these tough situations. And then we're going to use, in this case, it's a 10 mil. A lot of times what you'll find is these bleeders and even the Banjo bolts right here, the flow-through bolts, they're standard sizes, so they're not metric most times, so you got to keep that in mind. In this case, it is metric, so it's a 10 mil. I'm using a 6 point on here, so we don't round it. And we're going to make sure we can loosen it. Now the reason I'm using a 3/8 ratchet on something so small like this is because you want to be able to put force to it straight and not be cocking it to the side with a 1/4 inch and really rounding it off or snapping it off. You want to do it nice and straight, and this is going to give you the leverage to do so. So we're going to go ahead and loosen it, and we're going to loosen it in a couple of turns. Make sure it feels fine and it's actually coming out and tightens back up with no issues. And you just snug it back up just a little bit like that, and now we're safe to pull off the Banjo bolt. Now like I said, these bolts are standard most times. 14 mil will also work on these, and most of them are 14 millimeter or 9/16, but the actual size is 9/16 on there. The point is, if you don't have a 9/16 on hand, a lot of people don't nowadays, you can use a 14, just might stick on there. So what I use is impact all the time to break torque on these. And get them coming out of there. Now after that, this should just unscrew out of here, no sweat.
Should not be no rust or cross-threading or anything weird like that going on. So what you're going to do is pull it out, and you're going to make sure the outer washer comes off, which it has. We're going to get our leak underneath the pan here, the pan underneath the leak. There we go. And then you can start inspecting your bolt to make sure it's not damaged in any way on here. In the meantime, we're going to pull this off, and we're going to put it down into the pan so it can just drip out into the pan here. And this is where Old Faithful comes in, the cat claw. We're going to pop this one off here because it'll be stuck in there. And we can start cleaning up around it on here. Get any dirt away that's encrusted underneath there. Make sure our sealing surface is clean on there. Now ideally, if that washer was on there, there should be no corrosion in the actual sealing surface. So we're just going to get rid of some of this extra dirt and stuff like that, brushing away. Stuff like that. And then I use Scotch-Brite on here. Again, going away from the hole. And I clean that sealing surface really well. Just like that. And then of course, do the same thing on your junction block here. As long as your surface that the copper washer is going onto is clean, we'll be good to go here. Next thing's next, I actually clean this off with some brake clean, spraying down the way and not into the hose. We can clean this off really well so we can do the job right here. Get that going. And then for the caliper up there, I'll spray a rag. And again, just kind of wipe away from the hole. These trucks have some mileage on them and all that, and they're just going to be nasty around them. You can only do your best. And already that's looking much better. And you got to remember, if you get any fine particles in there at all, we are going to be evacuating all the fluid out of this caliper bore while we're bleeding, so it's not a huge issue. And then the same thing with the flow-through bolt. I'll clean that with some brake clean, even the inside of it, and then we'll blow it out nice and dry with some compressed air. Okay, with everything apart and clean, we're going to take our Banjo bolt and we're going to put a washer on it. Okay, put it all the way on there. Then we're going to stick it through here, and then on the other side you're going to put another new washer. Now this is the critical part here. What we're going to do is make sure we thread it in by hand. It has fine threads to it, and you want to make sure you thread it in by hand and you get a line with the notch on there all the way seated back, and then you should simply be able to put this in by hand if everything's going according to plan. All the way in. And then to stop the leaking, we'll go ahead and we'll just tighten it. I like to wipe the area real quick. And then the torque spec on this bolt it's pretty critical, so you crush that washer just enough to seal and not overextend it. Most of them are around 25 to 35 foot-pounds, this one being 24 foot-pounds. So we'll torque that, and with new washers on here, at this torque they specify, it should have no problem sealing. So at this point, once this is repaired and bled and cleaned, if there's a problem afterwards, you know there's a mating surface issue. to look into. And you can see I'm going quite a bit here, and that's because it's crushing the copper washer on there. Once it has achieved torque like that, I go over it again and again as it settles. Get that off of there. Now at this point you're going to want to open end. The bleeder is already broken free, the torque's broke on it, so it's just loosened there. We're going to use the open end to open it enough, and then we're going to start the bleeding process. Now what I use is a vacuum bleeder like this. This is what Ford recommends for just about all their brake systems except for the hybrids. So this will vacuum bleed the system of any air. The only downside to this is that you will need shop air to do so. So we're simply going to put it on the bleeder. Once it goes over it, move it around a little bit, and it'll lock on. And then we're simply going to turn on the vacuum bleeder before we ever open that screw on there. And then we'll tighten it. And that's all there is to it. Now at this point the bleeder is nice and tight. I like to recheck it after I've tightened it with the open end. I'll tighten it with the box end. And then what you're going to want to do is clean this area up big time with brake clean. And this way it'll clean the area real nice. Now what I also do, while it's nice and wet, is I will blow off the area too. Okay, and with everything back together and cleaned up, there should be no more leaks. Go ahead and make sure your brake fluid reservoir is topped off, and then apply the brakes with the engine running so you get that pressure going through there, and make sure there's no seepage or leaks, and then you can go for a test drive and really see if there's no leaks. And this should be a good repair at this point. New copper washers, they really deform into any imperfections in there, and it should make it leak free.